Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm glad you are here. If you tuned in, I am your host for this talk, CJ Wilson. I would love if you would stick around for this talk, though I'm going to be straightforward and upfront with you. This talk is kind of something that I'm doing just on the spot, something that I've kind of just made. Recent inspiration has made me go down this path. But without further ado, I'm just going to get, straight into it. And really, this all started with the dawning of a thought of not even that, just like a call to talk and shine a light on like how spirituality is connected with, and I dare say, Stoicism, and the links and chains that kind of are similar rather than separate between Stoicism and spirituality. People in the spiritual community tend to be, and pardon me if it comes out as a little brute, but woo woo. And then people in Stoicism tend to be hyper realistic and kind of almost like Omega Chad, if I dare say, as well. It almost is like people are on the separate ends of the spectrums. Like you're either Stoicism or, you're Master Reiki healer, spiritual leader. Just saying. I'm being a little hyperbolic with my words and my descriptions here, but we tend to have more separation in, let's say, the schools of thoughts and schools of life, let's say, Stoicism and spirituality, than, unison. And if you allow me actually to go on my computer here, I have a little writing that I typed up. So I'm just going to read to you this, and then we'll kind of convene after and let's try to make something of it. Bridges between Stoicism and modern spirituality are more surprising than you may think. The observation that the world has an intelligent nature to it is the logos, which is uniquely Stoicism, or Stoic. Spirituality is more or less a blanket term for the understanding that we have of the universal laws. Though we could say energy is the foundation of everything, in spirituality, we can probably, just give it the blanket, foundation of spirituality with, energy. And here I'll continue reading. In both cases, we see that the dominating force in the world is an intelligent, formless force that moves amongst us and through us. That is profound because it means that we are listening to an intuitive tug, invisible, pretty darn well. And we're following this intuitive, invisible tug towards a better life. At the end of the day, Stoicism and spirituality is just kind of like listening to nothing, listening to some good. I mean, there is actual literal, approaches to Stoicism. So I'm not going to say that, Stoicism is nothing and there's not order, because there's actual laws, to Stoicism. But when you come to think of it, we're just following, like intuitive tugs. And you know what? I talked about, the Stoicism train of thoughts. Let's go down depth into one Stoicism discipline right now, because I have a book right with me, Meditations. If you know Ryan Holiday, the foreword is by him. It's noteworthy foreword. But also, the translation was done by a man called Gregory Hayes. And he is part of the Modern Library, if you know much about the, just book publishing services. And he did a really good job of actually dissecting Marcus Aurelius's life, which is, if you know anything about Stoicism, you've probably heard about Marcus Aurelius, not because he's a foundational member of Stoicism, but because he kind of just became the resultant image of it. And I just wanted to give you that little backstory before we go in, so you kind of know what we're reading from. But right here, I'm not gonna quote you what page because it's all in Roman numerals, and but right here, like this whole paragraph is just about like the discipline, one of the 4 disciplines in Stoicism, and this one has to do with discipline of perception. And just get a load of this, because this is one of the foundational core, let's say, metrics of Stoicism. But it just, once you hear it, it just kind of makes sense in such a way that it's profound. So without further ado, the discipline of perception requires that we maintain absolute objectivity of thought, that we see things dispassionately for what they are. Proper understanding of this point requires a brief introduction to the Stoic theory of cognition. We have seen that for the Stoics, universal order is represented by the Logos. The Logos infuses and is wielded by our hegemonikin, literally that which guides, which is an intellective part of our consciousness. In different contexts, it can approximate either will or character, and it performs many of the functions that English speakers attribute to the brain or the heart. One of the primary functions is to process and access data we receive from our senses. At every instant, the objects and events in the world around us bombard us with the impressions. As they do so, they produce fantasia, a mental impression. From this, the mind generates a perception, hypolepsis, which might be best compared to a print made from a photographic negative. Ideally, this print will be an accurate and faithful representation of the original, but it may not be. It may be blurred, or it may include shadow images that distort or obscure the original. And there's just a little bit more that I want to read, because this will add just a little bit more to talk about and kind of give you a broader viewpoint of Stoicism. Chief amongst these are inappropriate value judgments, the designation as good or evil of things that in fact are neither good nor evil. For example, my impression that my house is just burnt down is simply that an impression or a report conveyed to me by my senses about an outside event of the world. By contrast, my perception that my house is burned down and I have thereby suffered a terrible tragedy includes not only an impression but also an interpretation imposed by that initial impression of my powers of hypolepsis. It is by no means the only possible interpretation, and I am not obliged to accept it. I may be a good deal better off if I decline to do so. It is, in other words, not objects and events, but interpretations we place on them that are the problem. Our duty is therefore to exercise stringent control over the faculty of perception with the aim of protecting our mind from error. You can see right there, right away in the book, if we just slow down for a second, that Stoicism is like, it points out the nature of the mind more than not. Spirituality is, we love to say that it's, it's mind-based, but truly, in matter of fact, it's more energy-based. Yet, the bridge, let's go back to my writing here, because this is where I kind of break it down more than I could speak off the top of my head. But The distinction is made not to say that the two are the same, but only to the point that we are what we preach. Rather, because I know not everyone preaches, we are what we practice. If you practice curls, then you're good at curls. If you practice forward folds, then you're good at forward folds. With philosophy and spirituality, you're only as solid as a practice you continue to partake in. If you forget your practice, then just forget it. You have only strayed from the path which is defining you in the first place. To be an embodied version of your best self means becoming more than what you are. Stoicism strives towards supreme virtues. A spiritual master is one who can deal with all energies, and yet remain in an enlightened state. At least not resort to fear or lose his or her composure. You see, in this way, the path that you walk becomes the mold in which reality has to conform to. That is your inherent power of choice. If you don't choose, then an invisible force will choose for you. More often than not, I have found that force to be desire. Let me get a coffee sip before I just Stoicism and spirituality might not be the same. They're surely not the same, because if they were the same, they would just be the same. But the one thing I love about, I guess, spirituality, or just, yeah, we'll just keep it at spirituality and stoicism, is that the practice makes the perfection. You can't be a good stoic if you don't practice your school of thought. We've only touched on like one of the parts of the foundations of stoicism, but there's far more, depending on which school that you could learn. And if you don't stick to that, then you lose that. You lose the form. You lose your way of dealing with the world. And the same is found in spirituality. Like spirituality, if you're becoming a Reiki master, let's say, because I just like using that example for some reason, you have to work with energies real well. You are feeling your own chakras and then gaining a sense of knowing other people. So it's like you're understanding other people at a deep level. And that's a practice. That's literally something that you do, day in, day out. And that's kind of what molds, your reality as a whole. Something as tedious and something probably more universal than, designated to a select practices, or let's say group, is mindfulness. Like mindfulness, you can't be a mindful human being if you don't practice mindfulness. You can't achieve something if you don't strive towards your achievement. Spirituality may not be akin, it may not be, closely related to Stoicism. But I find in engaging with the world, it's just having to deal with the ether of the world, almost the logos, which the logos is, which nothing really is, yet everything comes from. It's the same core, kind of principle that, energy is almost everything and anything. Energy is packed inside this crayon and can be creative force if you so will. Or, I mean, it could just be a mess on the wall that a kid drew, like it doesn't have to be creative. It could just be chaos. Everything has its, I don't want to say purpose, and I don't want to say meaning, but everything has its potential. And with potential, you can either use that potential for, I don't want to say good and evil, but I do want to say good and evil because you can use it for your benefit or you can use it not for your benefit. And if we go back to the Stoicism train of thought, I don't have the page open, but it's like they said right there in the book. Gregory Hayes, kind of said it in the book because I want to give him, the respect for those words is that, and also it's really a Stoicism concept. So good and evil is only a perception of mind. The mind is what sees something as good or evil. Nothing is good or evil in its nature, because everything comes from just the creation of the world. Everything is just energy. Energy isn't positive or negative, when you're working in the spiritual realm, it's more or less just energy. It's only us that puts the term, positive or negative. Same is said for, I guess what I'm really trying to say is the same, the bridge from Stoicism to spirituality is that right there. And that's profound. Truly, it is profound. Because right there, it's just, I don't know why it shocks me, but it just does. I had to share it with you. You are what you practice. You are more than what you could be. 100%. I'm looking at you dead in the eye, viewer. You are more than you could be. You can be more than you are, but you already are. It's either a perception that you're not, it's a perception that you're good or evil, or it's not, according to the Stoic philosophy. So, what shall you do? What shall we do with this information learned? I'm not going to say go practice mindfulness, even though you'll gain many benefits from practicing mindfulness. But what I would say is maybe something more practical, like I don't know. I think mindfulness is probably the best you could do. That's a good starting point. Learn how to see things without judgment, and then you can build from a judgmentally free mind. And then if you want to go down the pathway of Stoicism, you should probably learn more of the core principles so you can be more, let's say, adhere to the way more clearly. Though down the lengths and the realms of spirituality, if you want to go down that, let's say, path, then treating the world as something that's neither positive or negative and trying to erase the duality, which is almost inherently part of society, if I dare say. But I think it more stems from our own minds than it's society's, blanketing. I think it's just the way our brains kind of perceive the world. It's nothing more, psychological than it is, a conjuring of society against mankind. It's more just the way we see things. And that is in the hue of good or evil. We're taught that from a very, very young age because it just makes sense for little itty bitty mini minds. Though understanding that good and evil is only yet but another perception on top of what you already seen is probably a good realization to dawn upon yourself in order to make or to see the world a bit more clear. Because if you're able to see the world just a bit more clear, you'll reduce anxiety, you'll probably eliminate depression, you will find more clarity and almost tranquility in the chaos in which will dawn upon your world, which it definitely will at some point. And you'll be able to deal with people without reacting to them. And I mean, there's tremendous benefits from just being able to see the world from, I guess, a more grounded perception, one that's more whole and true in its aim than if not. That's all I gotta say. That's my practical advice. Now, it's coming from someone who's practiced a lot of Stoicism, and at least has read a lot. Like, I've read quite a bit. That book, was just a further, education, but I've seen videos beforehand. And spirituality, I've been there. I've been in spiritual zones too, and just kind of seen, what people had to offer, because I'm I love information and I love learning. It's I love things that pique my curiosity, but also my intellect that makes me wise. Hence why I babble your mouth off all the time on this YouTube channel, if you're still sticking around. Which I hope you are, but you never have to feel inclined to stay. You can't always go, but you always can stay. So, like, keep that wisdom with you. Old man told me that. Old man once told me, he said, well, you can't always go somewhere, but you'll always stay home, so you might as well go somewhere if you can. Yeah, respect to the old man, because that helped me actually make a lot of choices. But without further ado, trying to astray you even further, I guess what I really wanted to say is thank you for sticking along this talk. You already got the core principles in which I was trying to say, so thank you for listening. Meditations. If you want something that's not too long to read and honestly has really good advice for you, like just day to day life, just like something to keep your head on the rails so you're not actually going off the train tracks out in the bog, getting mudded down by the world. Read Meditations. It'll be good. Even if you don't like reading, it's not like it's not complicated at all. That's my quick meditations shout out. But anywho, I'm glad you've tuned along again. I'm thanking you for the 8 millionth time. Please do make a choice or a distinction about how you want to view the world for not only today but the days to follow, or write out some guidelines, to say the least. I know I probably will, even though I already have today, so I probably don't have to, but do something to set you on the right path rather than go ahead, with no idea about what's going on and how things are going to turn out. You have a choice to choose your fate. You don't have to let fate be, held by the fates. You make your life the way you want it. So, why are you listening to me? Go make it. Bye.